It's the middle of the night again. You're lying still, but your mind isn't. Maybe your body's tired. Truly, deeply tired. But something inside you keeps flickering. Memories. Worries. That one sentence someone said. That one thing you wish you hadn't forgotten. That strange ache behind your eyes that isn't really physical, but definitely real. Maybe it's anxiety, or the quiet hum of grief that comes and goes like a tide. Maybe it's trauma, old or fresh. Or maybe tonight your brain just won't slow down. No reason, no warning, just won't. Whatever brought you here, I'm glad you're here. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to sleep immediately. You just have to rest, however that looks. So let's wander somewhere quieter, somewhere older, somewhere dimly lit by candlelight and filled with hushed voices and tightly clutched rosary beads. Let's go back to medieval Europe and step into the small, private, strange world of childbirth. You open your eyes to the inside of a wooden room, low ceiling, rushes on the floor. The air is heavy, warm, almost too warm. It smells of beeswax, herbs, and something human, something raw and alive and sacred. A woman lies in a bed, not quite a bed, more like a pile of blankets atop a wooden frame. Her eyes are shut. Her breath comes in short, sharp waves. She's not alone. Around her, 4 women work in silence. A midwife, 2 helpers, and an older neighbor who came unasked but is allowed to stay because she's seen more births than anyone here. The door is shut and barred. No men allowed, not even the husband. This is a gossip room, a sacred female space. Not gossip like idle chatter, but in its old sense, godsibs or godsisters. Women gathered together to protect, to pray, to guide life into the world. You sit quietly in the corner, unseen, unnoticed, and you watch. There's chanting, not loud, more like murmurs, fragments of Latin, old words said without full understanding, but said with purpose. A candle burns beside a carved wooden statue of Mary. A scrap of cloth tied to the bedpost, a relic, someone said. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just cloth. The midwife unwraps a pouch. Inside, salt ash, a little iron key, each placed in a corner of the room to guard against spirits, or envy, or fate. Childbirth in this time is a battlefield. Not loud and glorious, but slow, bloody, private, and sacred. The woman cries out. No one flinches. They press warm cloths to her skin. They whisper prayers. They bind charms near the window. Outside, church bells ring softly in the distance, the 6th hour. No one in this room moves toward the sound, because in this moment there is only one goal: keep her alive. Bring the baby through. If you're still awake and this voice is helping you feel even slightly more grounded, you're welcome to like or subscribe, but only if it helps. No pressure. You're already doing enough. Where are you right now? Still in bed? one arm under your pillow, lying there in the quiet, with your screen glowing like a nightlight, sitting on the floor, back against the wall, just needing something soft to hold you. However you're here, you're welcome. Take a breath. Let it out slowly. Unclench your jaw. Let your thoughts drift, not vanish. Just drift. Tonight we'll sit beside the fire, in the corner of this old wooden room, and watch how life entered the world before hospitals, before painkillers, before anyone wrote it down properly, with salt, with songs, with women who stayed. Let's begin. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a dimly lit chamber where the air smells faintly of beeswax and thyme. You're not entirely sure what's about to happen, but the women around you seem confident, even if their brows are furrowed and their sleeves are rolled up. The door creaks shut behind you, and suddenly you realize this room isn't just a place. It's a boundary between life and death, between the sacred and the profane, between a mother's pain and a baby's first cry. You're about to give birth in medieval Europe, and you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The pain starts quietly, like a thrum, low in your back. You're used to aches. This is the Middle Ages after all, but this one grows sharp quickly, cutting across your belly like a sickle through barley. Outside the birthing room, your neighbors continue about their day. Inside, the world slows to a trickle. Only the midwife is here now. She nods knowingly, like she's seen this 100 times. She probably has. You groan. She pours warm water into a wooden bowl, drops in a handful of dried herbs, marjoram, maybe a bit of lavender if she's lucky enough to have it. The steam curls into the air like a quiet prayer. There's no doctor here, no sterile gloves, no epidural, waiting to rescue you. Just cloth, faith, and whatever home remedies she's tucked into her apron. You're not alone, though. A few women from the village have been summoned. It's tradition, they call it, the gossiping in some places, from the Old English God sib, meaning a group of women spiritually connected. They gather not to chat, but to support, to chant, to wash, and yes, sometimes to faint. Birth is considered sacred and mysterious, so, of course, it's only for women. The door to the room is locked, not metaphorically, physically. No man may enter now, not even the father, unless things go terribly wrong. There's a candle burning near the threshold to keep away spirits. The shutters are drawn to protect from the evil eye. You might laugh now, but in the low light of the room, with the air thick from incense and pain, it doesn't seem so ridiculous. The line between this world and the next feels awfully thin. The floor is packed with straw, not to comfort your feet, but to absorb the blood. You'll be glad for it later. Outside the room, your husband paces. Or maybe he's gone to the tavern. He's been told to stay away and pray or drink. He's probably doing both. The pain deepens. You clutch your belly, curse softly, then feel a flash of guilt and murmur a quick apology to the Virgin Mary. In this world, childbirth is spiritual warfare. Prayers fly thick. You beg saints to intercede. Saint Margaret of Antioch is a favorite. She famously escaped a dragon's belly, which feels metaphorically fitting right now. A priest might be outside waiting to perform a baptism. Just in case the baby doesn't make it, or in case you don't. You try not to think about that. The midwife brings you something bitter in a wooden cup. It's an herbal concoction that includes mugwort, maybe rue, something to dull the pain or just distract you with its taste. Historians still argue whether these mixtures actually helped or just gave women something to cling to. Either way, you drink. The contractions come faster now. You drop to your knees, then try the stool, the infamous birthing chair. It has a hole in the middle, and it looks suspiciously like torture furniture. 3 legs for stability, they say, or perhaps instability, depending on who made it. There's no screaming yet, but there will be. You've been warned not to curse or insult the saints. That can go badly. Women have been accused of blasphemy in childbirth. One story tells of a woman who shouted, "The devil, take this baby," and people said he did. That may or may not be true. But either way, you'll keep your outbursts saint-friendly. The pain crescendos. The midwife checks your progress with the only tools she has, her hands and experience. No gloves, no antiseptic, just touch breath and quiet muttering. You feel something shift, a deep, terrifying drop inside your body, like the earth has opened up. You reach for the rope hanging from the ceiling. Yes, there's often a rope to pull on during contractions. It's comforting in its simplicity. Then come the chants. Not the Gregorian kind, but woman-made music prayers, blessings, sometimes just humming. It's not beautiful, exactly. It's raw. It feels old, older than the stone walls around you. You cry out. One of the women mops your brow with a cloth soaked in wine. You can't tell if it's meant to cleanse or calm you, maybe both. Then it happens, a gush, a push, a scream, and silence. Just for a moment. Everyone leans in. Is there crying? The baby must cry. That's the rule. Crying means breathing. Breathing means life. That sound, the wail, that's both defiance and announcement, finally comes. You sob with relief. Not from joy, not yet. Just from the absence of silence. The women murmur their thanks. They cross themselves. The baby is here, but this is only the beginning. The room doesn't celebrate, not in the way you'd expect. There's no cheering, no champagne, no balloons spelling out, "It's a boy" or "It's a girl." Just soft movements and quiet murmurs, as if speaking too loudly might scare the baby or the saints. The midwife doesn't hand the newborn to you right away. That's not how it works. First, she inspects the baby, checks its limbs, its eyes, its cries. Then she wraps it in a cloth soaked in herbs and wine, sometimes warm, sometimes sour. The wrapping is tight, swaddling, they call it. A medieval baby looks more like a burrito than a person. You're still bleeding. The midwife throws a glance your way silently, calculating if it's too much. There's no transfusion waiting in the next room, only more cloths, more prayers, and maybe a whispered plea to St. Bridget or St. Raymond, Nonatus, patron of childbirth. Now enters the midwife fully into her element, not just a helper, but a commander of this little world. Her knowledge isn't written in books. It's passed from woman to woman, through whispered stories and worn hands. She knows how to deliver a baby, how to press your belly to stop the bleeding, how to chew certain herbs and spit them into poultices. She might carry a leather pouch full of dried roots and iron pins. If she's skilled, she also knows when to fake confidence, because you're watching her with wide, frightened eyes, and fear has no place here. She speaks briskly to the other women, orders them to fetch warm cloths. One of them, perhaps your mother, rubs your arm gently. Another pours water over your legs, trying to wash away the mess. The smell, the sharp reminder of what just passed. The birthing chair creaks as you're helped up, still shaking. Your legs feel like stilts made of pudding. The midwife lays the baby in a cradle beside the fire, close enough to keep warm, not too close to dry out. She adds rosemary to the flames. It smells sharp and clean. Not like cleanliness today, more like cleansing, as in spiritual. The women around you begin to chant a simple rhyme, something about St. Anne, or maybe it's just a lullaby. You recognize the tune, but can't recall the words. It doesn't matter. You hum along, tears still leaking down your cheeks. Outside, a rooster crows. No, wait, it's a man shouting something. Maybe your husband finally allowed to check if you're still breathing. The midwife ignores him. She's too busy inspecting the afterbirth. Ah, yes, the afterbirth. You're not done. She waits for the placenta, encourages you to push. You thought the worst was over, but the pain returns, less dramatic, more cruel in its persistence. The women tell you to breathe. One presses hard on your belly. You groan. Something warm and soft slips out. The midwife catches it in a cloth and nods. That's a good sign. A full placenta means no fragments left inside to rot. Yes, rot. That's a real danger. Once she's satisfied, she examines it not just for health, but for omens. Some say the shape of the placenta can predict the child's future. If it's round and smooth, the baby will be even-tempered. If it has holes or tears, expect trouble. Historians still argue whether such readings were superstition or proto-science. Probably both. She wraps the placenta carefully and places it in a small clay pot. You watch groggy as she mutters something under her breath. Then she buries it beneath the hearth. That's common. The hearth is the heart of the home, and burying the afterbirth there is thought to bind the child to its family, to protect its spirit, and possibly to keep witches away. Speaking of witches, there's always that whisper in the background, isn't there? Childbirth is tangled in magic and faith. Midwives walk a fine line. They are saviors one day, suspects the next. A mother loses too much blood. Did the midwife say the wrong prayer? A baby born with a crooked limb. Did she anger a saint? Some women wear charms around their necks throughout pregnancy, pieces of coral, tiny crosses, or the tooth of a wolf. Some are stitched into the hem of your nightgown. Others are hidden under pillows. You didn't ask what all of them were, probably for the best. But now, in this hazy hour after birth, the room feels less holy and more human. The baby begins to fuss. Nothing dramatic, just a soft wheeze. The midwife checks again, and this time she lets you hold it. Your arms tremble as you take the tiny swaddled form. You're afraid to breathe too hard, as if your exhale might blow the baby away. The baby's skin is red blotchy with strange white patches. You blink worried. The midwife shrugs. They all look strange at first, she says, like old men or prunes. She's not wrong. Most medieval babies are born underweight, scrunched their heads, misshapen from the ordeal. But if they cry and suckle, they live. Your breasts are sore. The baby roots instinctively, but you wince. Breastfeeding isn't guaranteed. Some mothers can't or won't. That's where wet nurses come in, but that decision comes later. The other women begin to clean, slowly, deliberately. They don't rush. You rest your head back against a wall, eyes fluttering. The fire crackles. The cloths are soaked. The room is quieter now, but it still holds the echo of your pain. It will linger there for days. Someone says a prayer over you. You can't quite make out the words, but you feel the weight of them. Heavy, protective, like a blanket that smells of smoke and lavender. And then the door unlatches, just slightly. The world begins to re-enter. The door creaks open, but it's not the husband, just yet. A younger girl, maybe a cousin, or someone's daughter peeks in to bring a fresh bucket of water and a clean cloth. She tries not to look directly at the mess. You can't blame her. The room still smells of iron and sweat and smoke and something raw, something that says life happened here and it nearly didn't. The women nod her thanks. She scurries away. You're not allowed out of bed for days. Even sitting up is discouraged. The belief is that moving too soon could let in bad humors or cause the womb to wander. Yes, medieval medicine teaches that your womb can get ideas of its own, floating up to your ribs or rattling around like a lost cat if you don't lie still. Some still think this is metaphor, but some records take it disturbingly literally. To be safe, they bind your belly tightly with cloth, like a corset made from bed linens. It holds everything in, or at least it's supposed to. It's not comfortable. But then again, nothing about this process has been. Beside you, the baby sleeps swaddled so tightly, you wonder how it breathes. That's the point. Swaddling is thought to straighten limbs, shape bones, and calm the humors. One midwife insists on tying the baby's hands down. Another swears that leaving one free will let the soul find its rhythm. Historians still debate whether this was medicine superstition or some cocktail of both. You've been rubbed with warm oils and wrapped in thick blankets, even though the fire is still going strong. Someone places rosemary under your pillow. Another woman hums again this time, a tune you recognize from a funeral last year, comforting. Soon, the conversation around the room shifts, not to your health. That's assumed to be dicey for a while, and everyone's a bit too superstitious to comment on it directly. Instead, they talk about the baby. They don't ask if it's cute. That's not a medieval concern. The questions are, is the head misshapen? Are the fingers curled correctly? Did it scream, or was it eerily quiet? Is the left eye larger than the right? You'd think these were signs of sickness, and sometimes yes, but more often they're signs of something else, omens. People watch closely for anything out of the ordinary. A birthmark might be considered a divine blessing, or a curse, or maybe a past sin returning in visible form. There's a knock on the doorframe. Finally, your husband appears, head ducked, low eyes shifting between you and the child. He doesn't come close, not yet. He's waiting to see if he's invited in. This is your space now, a women's world, and though he's legally the head of the household in this moment, he's just another uncertain figure trying to make sense of the miracle or accident that is life. He asks if the baby has been baptized. You shake your head. Not yet. That's a problem. You're both aware of the risks. Infant mortality is common. Some say nearly 1 in 3 babies won't survive the first few weeks. And the church insists that only baptized children enter heaven. So, if the baby dies unbaptized, it doesn't go to hell exactly, but to limbo, a vague theological waiting room where the baby is forever separated from God. No one wants that, especially not first-time parents. In urgent cases, the midwife herself can perform the baptism. She has a little flask of holy water tucked into a pouch just for this purpose. She knows the words. In fact, she's done it before. Some even do it while the baby is still halfway out, just in case. But yours is alive, breathing, sleeping, in fact. So, the priest is sent for. Until then, the room is treated like a sanctuary. No loud voices, no rough movement. Even the fire is kept gentle. One of the older women says that harsh heat might scare away the soul. You believe her. The midwife examines the umbilical cord. It's already been tied and cut, not with sterile scissors, but with a sharp piece of iron or even a broken shard of pottery, tied with thread or sometimes sheep's wool. The end is black now, drying. She sprinkles a powder on it, maybe ash, maybe ground herbs. It's to stop infection. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You're handed a small cup, more of that bitter root tea. It's lukewarm now, but no less unpleasant. They say it'll cleanse you, meaning help your womb return to its proper size and push out whatever's left. The cramps that follow are dull and relentless. You breathe through them. You've got practice now. There's a lull in the room, For a few minutes, no one speaks. The only sound is the crackling of the fire and the soft, rhythmic breath of your baby. You stare at the ceiling beams and wonder briefly what other women have stared at them before you. They were here too, on straw pallets, in pain, in silence, hoping the midwife was right, hoping the saints were listening. Someone drops a linen cloth over the window. The light dims further. It's not nighttime yet, but in this space, time warps. You could be in the 10th century or the 14th. It doesn't matter. Birth has always felt like stepping outside of time. The priest arrives. You hear his sandals before his voice. He's allowed in now, but only for the ritual. He approaches the baby and murmurs Latin. You can't follow the words, but you hear the name, a saint's name chosen quickly in case time is short. He sprinkles the water. The baby flinches. It's done. Everyone breathes again. The baby is now in the eyes of God, which in this era might be the closest thing to safety. The priest leaves without ceremony, his robe brushing the floor and picking up bits of straw. He doesn't stay to coo at the baby or congratulate you. That's not his role. His job is done. The baby is baptized, the soul secured. He has another 5 homes to visit before nightfall, and not all of them will have happy endings. You lie there, arms limp, watching the candlelight dance across the beams above. Your body feels both empty and unbearably full. The baby now sleeps in a wooden cradle nearby, simple, carved by someone local, maybe your husband, maybe a neighbor. There's no paint, just rough edges softened by linen and time. One of the women approaches carrying a curious object, a chair, but not just any chair. This is the chair, the birthing chair, or more accurately, the one you were supposed to use earlier but didn't quite get to because everything happened so fast. You eye it with a mix of relief and suspicion. It's a 3-legged wooden frame with a large hole in the seat, carved specifically to allow a woman to give birth while sitting, or more accurately, squatting, with support. The design is intentional. The open space allows gravity to assist, while the back offers just enough support to keep you upright. Comfort, however, is clearly not the priority. No pillows, no padding, just wood. You shudder at the thought of having actually used it. But many women do. Some swear by it. Others dread it. Historians still debate how widespread it was outside noble or urban households. But its symbolic importance endures. This chair means birth, and by extension it means power, danger, and transformation. In many homes, the birthing chair is kept tucked away almost reverently and only brought out for these sacred moments. It might even have a name or a history. This is the same one your grandmother used. Someone might say half proud, half ominous. If a woman dies during childbirth, which happens often, the chair is sometimes burned or buried. But not this time. They place it near the fire, not for use, but for cleaning. The midwife takes a damp cloth and begins to scrub gently, murmuring a few words under her breath. Maybe she's counting. Maybe she's praying. Hard to tell. There's a belief that the chair absorbs something from each birth, not just blood, but spirit. To let it sit too long unwashed is to invite bad luck, or worse. Meanwhile, the other women begin tending to the tools of the trade. A pot of warm water is replenished. Bloodied cloths are placed in a basket for boiling, though some may be burned depending on how much they were soaked through. The knife used to cut the cord is cleaned and blessed again with a drop of wine and a whispered phrase. You're surprised to find your legs are still trembling. A strange ache lingers in your lower back, like something pressing inward. You mention it quietly to the midwife. She nods without looking up. That's the bones remembering, she says. What she means is the pelvis slowly shifting back into place. But in this world, it might as well be the soul reshuffling itself. There are stories of women who limp for months after childbirth. Others who never quite walk the same again. Some say their voices change, that the pain rearranges something deep down. One of the women offers you a sip of warm broth. It tastes mostly like salt and thyme. Your body responds with surprising gratitude. Eating after birth is encouraged, but only certain things. No cold food, no dairy for a few days. Nothing too acidic. The belief is that your body is open porous and easily influenced. Speaking of openness, your body is still considered a vessel after birth. Not just in the poetic sense. There's a literal concern that something could enter you if you're not careful. Spirits, drafts, evil. So you're wrapped tightly in layers of cloth and blankets, even if it's summer. Your hair is bound. Your feet are never bare. The baby stirs, letting out a short, creaky cry like a rusted hinge swinging open. One of the women, older and experienced, leans in and coos. She checks the swaddle, adjusts a fold, then tucks a small charm into the blanket. You're not sure what it is. A carved bit of bone, maybe, or a knot of wool with a tiny cross inside. What is it, you ask? To keep the bad dreams away, she replies, and pats your hand as if that explains everything. You suppose it does. The baby is not yet named. That won't happen formally until the baptism is recorded in the parish register. But among the women here, names have already begun to circulate. Some call it Little John, others Maria's boy. Names are flexible at this stage, not quite real yet. In fact, some families don't officially name their babies for several days or even weeks. There's a logic behind it. If the baby dies, and many do, it's easier, they say, to grieve something that was never quite a someone. It's a chilling practicality, softened only by habit and belief. But your baby is breathing, sleeping, swaddled and fed. And for now, that is miracle enough. The midwife finishes scrubbing the chair and places a sprig of dried sage beneath it. a habit passed down from her teacher. She says it keeps the next birth from carrying the weight of this one. The room is quieter now. The women speak in softer tones. The pace slows. One of them begins braiding your hair gently, humming again. The same tune as before. You glance at the chair one last time. Empty now. Cleaned. Resting. You hope it stays that way for a long while. The air in the room changes after the chair is scrubbed and put away. It's not a dramatic shift. No clap of thunder. No gust of wind. Just a soft, slow exhale from the walls themselves, like the house is relieved that the hardest part is over. But it isn't. Because now comes the ritual of the room. And in medieval Europe, the birthing chamber isn't just a space, it's a living sacred entity, and it must be treated as such. From the moment your labor began, this room became sealed. Physically, yes, but also spiritually. The windows were shuttered. The latch was drawn. No man could enter. No unblessed object could be removed. What happened here had to stay here until everything was cleansed. You lie beneath layers of linen and wool, warm in a way that borders on suffocating. The midwife insists on keeping you covered. The air can turn your blood, she mutters, pulling the blankets higher. You don't ask what that means. You've heard enough stories to know it's not meant to be questioned. One of the older women begins to retie the window coverings. Thin strips of linen, dipped in a mix of wine and ash, are hung at the corners. They don't block much light, but they're believed to keep spirits from peering in. No one wants a wandering soul catching sight of a newborn, especially not one recently separated from its own body. There's also the incense. A small clay dish is filled with smoldering herbs, sage, rosemary, bay leaf. The smoke curls upward in lazy spirals, painting the air with earthy fragrance and just a hint of burnt bitterness. It stings your nose slightly, but no one opens a window. The smoke must stay in, must saturate the room. It doesn't just mask the smell of blood and sweat. It wards off sickness, or so they say. At the center of the room, a wax candle burns low. Not a stub from the kitchen, but a special one, thick pale yellow, carved with faint lines near the base. You noticed it earlier, when the pain began, but only now do you realize it has burned almost halfway down. The flame dances like it knows something. That candle was lit at the first cry. It's said to keep the soul from drifting out of the baby's body before baptism. Some women have a separate soul candle kept under the bed and only lit in emergencies. You think of the tiny chest at the foot of your own bed. Did your mother slip one in there when she packed your linens? One woman sprinkles holy water on the door frame, muttering Latin that might be real or might be half remembered. In some places, salt is also used, spread in a circle under the cradle or placed in the baby's first cap. It keeps away bad luck, or witches, or midwives accused of both. You shift beneath your covers, muscles sore and stomach hollow. Your lips crack as you try to speak. Can I eat you? Whisper. There's a pause. Then a bowl is offered, lukewarm porridge thick with barley and thinned with goat's milk. You eat slowly, spoon by spoon, tasting almost nothing but salt and exhaustion. No fruit, no cold drinks, nothing that might shock the belly. The stomach is fragile now, and anything too strong could unsettle the womb. Yes, the womb again, always the womb. A woman brushes your forehead with lavender water. She ties a cloth around your wrist, red, to keep your blood warm. Everything is tied or covered or bound. You are no longer a body. You are a vessel, still in transit. Meanwhile, the door stays shut. Not metaphorically, literally. No one may enter who hasn't been present since the birth. It's not just to protect you from drafts or germs, though they wouldn't call it that. It's to maintain the sanctity of the space. Some say it takes 3 full days before the room is clean again. Others say it's done once the mother and child sleep through the night side by side. Either way, the idea is clear. This room has touched the edge of something beyond life, and it needs time to return. The baby wakes with a small squawk. Someone lifts him gently, checks the cloths, rewraps a slipping swaddle. He's handed to you at last, not just to feed, but to bond. There's a seriousness to the gesture. You cradle him against your chest, awkwardly, protectively. His warmth presses into your skin. For a moment, everything else blurs. But the rituals aren't done. Not by a long shot. As night falls, someone brings a bundle wrapped in gray cloth. Inside are charms and tokens, things brought by friends and relatives left at the threshold earlier that day. A sliver of antler polished and shaped into a pendant. A coin blessed by a traveling friar. A piece of fabric cut from a bride's veil. All gifts for the child, but they cannot be brought in directly. Not yet. Each one must be introduced. That is unwrapped, passed over the candle, and named aloud. Some women sing as they do this. Others whisper. The baby is said to accept or reject each one. A dropped charm. That's a bad sign. A child who spits up after being gifted. Even worse. Yours is calm. Each item is tucked carefully into a box beside the cradle. It's called a blessing box. It will stay there for the first year or until another child is born and the ritual repeats. Finally, just before the women settle in for sleep on the floor, on benches by the fire, they close the circle. One places a sprig of yarrow above the door. Another scatters crushed fennel on the floor. Someone murmurs a last blessing, this one to Mary. It's not long or poetic, just a simple phrase. Let the mother rest. Let the child wake, only for joy. You close your eyes. The candle flickers once more, and the room still sealed drifts into a heavy sacred silence. You wake to the sound of chanting, not loud or melodic, but soft rhythmic. It's not church music. It's the chant of women who've done this 100 times before. Their voices are low and purposeful, like bees humming over herbs. You blink against the dim light. The candle has burned nearly down to its base wax, pooled and cooled like honey at the foot of the holder. In its place, a fresh taper is already lit. Someone must have kept watch. They always do. Beside you, the baby stirs with a whimper, not a cry. He's hungry, or cold, or both. A hand reaches out one of the older women, and she places the bundle against your chest without a word. You try to feed him, awkwardly, and he latches on with more strength than you expected. It surprises you, the instinct of it. The room smells less like blood now, and more like warm milk and damp straw. Someone's brewed another pot of herbs. You hear the gentle rattle of dried leaves hitting a clay cup. The midwife hands you something bitter again. Always something bitter. It's meant to strengthen your womb, to close it tight. They speak of your body like a gate that must be sealed, or else the breath of the grave might follow. Lovely thought. As you sip, a sharp pain grips your abdomen. Not the sudden slice of birth, but the deeper twisting ache of something rearranging inside you. You gasp, hand on your belly. That's Saint Apollonia helping, someone says with a smirk. You don't know if it's a joke or not. You groan anyway. Pain is not over when the baby is born. That's a modern myth. Here in the thick of medieval reality, pain has just changed shape. You're bleeding still, slowly, constantly. Sheets are changed more than once a day. The midwife checks the cloths, counting stains, noting color and smell. Too red is dangerous, too dark is worse. But what frightens you most is the expectation. You're supposed to be in pain. Anything less would be suspicious. That's why they've prepared chants. If the cramps worsen, you're told to shout, not curse, but chant. Call on the saints. Scream their names. Saint Margaret is a favorite again, as is Saint Ursula. There's even one woman who recommends reciting all the names of Mary's 7 sorrows, not for spiritual insight, but as a kind of vocal anesthesia. You try it. Sorrow 1, the prophecy of Simeon. The words don't help, but they distract. And in this moment, that's everything. There's a cloth tied around your head now. Not a decorative one, a binding. It's wound tightly around your forehead and jaw. This is called a mother's band, and it's believed to stabilize the head, which is thought to become loose during childbirth. Yes, you heard that right. A loose skull. Historians still argue if this was symbolic or anatomical. Either way, you're wearing one and it itches. You ask for water, but not too cold. Never cold. Cold might drive the heat deeper into your organs, and no one wants that. A lukewarm broth is handed to you instead, with fennel and, surprisingly, a pinch of dried rose. It tastes like regret. The baby sneezes. Everyone freezes. It's not that sneezing is bad, but a sneeze can mean a chill. A chill can mean a fever. A fever can mean, well, you know where that ends. One woman rushes to hold the baby closer to the fire. Another wraps him in an extra layer of wool. You half rise, panicked, but they wave you down. Best not move yet, they warn. The womb may drop. Ah, yes, the womb dropping, a delightful medieval belief that if you stand too early or move too quickly, your uterus might slip downward, fall out, or wander somewhere it doesn't belong. There are drawings of it, womb like a floating sack, drifting around the body like a confused jellyfish. Sometimes they treat it with incense, literally blow smoke into the body to lure it back into place. You lie back. Okay, fine. Let the uterus do what it wants. Eventually, one of the midwives brings a cloth bundle to your lap. Inside are stones warm from the hearth. She tucks them against your belly, layered between folds of linen. The heat eases the ache. Maybe, or maybe you just believe it does. Same difference, really. Someone suggests naming the baby soon. He has his soul now, they say, but he needs his name. It's not superstition, it's social. Without a name, the baby can't be fully prayed for, or talked about, or woven into stories. But you hesitate. What if he doesn't live? The thought arrives uninvited, then refuses to leave. You stare at his face, scrunched red, all soft folds, and wonder what he'd look like at 5, at 10, whether he'd have your eyes, your laugh, whether he'll make it to morning. The midwife senses your silence. She doesn't push. She begins telling a story instead, about a baby born during a thunderstorm. The candle blew out, the cord tied with string from a hanging man's coat. The baby survived, though, lived to be 90. You don't know if it's true, but it helps. Later, when the sun begins to peek through the linen-covered window, you feel a kind of peace, a thin one, fragile, but it's there. You chant softly your own little litany now, not to saints, but to time itself. Let the day be quiet. Let the baby sleep. Let the pain fade. And above all, let this still count as joy. The day crawls on sticky and slow, like honey left too long in the sun. Your limbs feel heavier now, not from pain, but from the sheer effort of existing. The baby sleeps more than he stirs, his tiny chest rising and falling like a bird's wing. Then comes the silence. It's the kind of silence that tastes different, unnatural. It's not the soft hush of women whispering or the soothing lull of a sleeping child. This one is too still. You realize the baby hasn't made a sound in over an hour. No grunts, no twitches, not even a sigh. You sit upright too fast. The room spins. A hand grips your shoulder, pushing you back down. Wait, someone says. Let the midwife check. The midwife steps over without panic, her face unreadable. She leans in, lifts the baby gently, and listens. She watches. She waits. And then a slow exhale. He's breathing, she says, shallow, but he's breathing. Everyone relaxes, but not fully. Because now the question must be asked, what if he hadn't? In medieval Europe, a baby who dies before baptism is not just a tragedy. It's a spiritual emergency. The baby's soul, according to the church, would be barred from heaven, not out of cruelty, but out of doctrine. Unbaptized infants are believed to enter limbus puerorum limbo, a place of neither pain nor joy, a forever twilight separate from God. You don't want to think about that, but you have to, because many babies don't make it. In some villages, the infant mortality rate is close to 30%. Some say more. And when death comes, it often comes fast. So, midwives are trained in something almost unthinkable: emergency baptisms. If the baby is born silent without movement or cry, they act quickly. Water. If holy water isn't on hand, then wine or even spit will do. A single phrase, "I baptize thee in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost." Even whispered, it counts. There is a recorded case of a midwife baptizing a child while it was still emerging, only the head visible. She spoke the words between contractions. The baby died minutes later. The family took comfort that his soul was safe. Historians still argue whether these rituals were formally sanctioned or quietly tolerated. Official doctrine was strict, but local practice was often shaped by fear and love more than theology. And if no baptism happened in time, that's where things got stranger. Some families held unofficial rites, secret burials, quiet blessings, even disguised baptisms. A mother might claim the baby died after the ritual, not before. A midwife might forget the truth. Small lies for eternal reward. There are stories of mothers sneaking unbaptized infants into churchyards at night, burying them just outside the consecrated boundary wall. In some places, children were buried under thresholds to protect the home. In others, near crossroads, where spirits might wander safely away. But not all reactions were tender. If a baby's silence at birth was taken as a sign of sin or sorcery, then whispers would follow. People would ask questions. Was the mother faithful? Was the midwife too familiar with herbs that shouldn't be used? Were there signs? A raven outside the house? A goat acting strangely? The line between medicine and magic was razor thin. Sometimes when no cry came and no breath followed, women would press a warm cloth to the baby's mouth. Others might try blowing air in. And once in a while someone would gently shake the child, not out of cruelty, but desperation. If even the appearance of life could be coaxed out, then maybe, just maybe, the baptism could count. Even today, historians debate whether such resuscitation attempts were spiritual rituals, proto-scientific medicine, or simply panic. Likely all three. You look down at your baby finally stirring again. His hands twitch in his sleep fists, curling a wrinkle of worry on his brow, like he knows how close he drifted. A woman beside you ties a ribbon around your wrist, blue this time. For protection, she says. Yours and his. She doesn't explain what it's meant to protect against. No one does. But you're grateful anyway. The room feels colder now, though the fire still burns. Someone adds more wood. The baby opens his mouth and lets out a soft cry. Not a scream, just a complaint. Everyone smiles. One of the women crosses herself. He's loud. That's good. It's not just good. It's proof. Because in this world, silence from a newborn is terrifying. Sound means breath. Breath means soul. A quiet baby is a mystery. A crying one is a miracle. And so crying is encouraged. Some midwives flicked babies' feet or pinched their heels to provoke it. Others whispered sharp noises near their ears or dunked them briefly in warm water, anything to summon a wail, to hear that raw, ragged announcement that life is here, still fragile. But here, your baby begins to cry again, stronger this time. You wince, then you smile, then you cry too. Not from pain, not from fear, just from the relief that for now he is not silent, and that in this strange and trembling world is enough to believe in. The fire crackles as someone tosses in a bundle of dried sage and nettle stems. Smoke lifts and curls through the air, tugging the light sideways. The scent is sharp and earthy, and suddenly the room feels more like a cauldron than a cradle. You glance toward the hearth and realize something is being prepared quietly, methodically, like a recipe that's been memorized across generations. The midwife has brought out a small clay pot, darkened with age and soot. Inside lies the afterbirth. Yes, the placenta. You thought they had buried it already. But no, that was just a saying buried under the hearth, used in many villages as a gentle euphemism. In truth, the fate of the placenta varies wildly, and sometimes it's anything but peaceful. In this house, they boil it. You try not to watch, but your curiosity refuses to blink. The pot is set low over the flame. A handful of herbs are added, rue wormwood, maybe a slice of dried onion. It bubbles slowly. The midwife murmurs something under her breath, a chant, or a recipe, or both. One of the women stirs the mixture with a spoon made from bone. You finally ask why the answers come all at once, overlapping like gossip. To keep the baby from fever, to prevent ghosts from following it, to test if the child will grow strong, to ensure the mother's womb is not cursed. The logic varies by region, by family, by mood. Historians still argue whether this ritual was medicinal, magical, or just a socially accepted way to process trauma. Possibly all three, possibly none. Sometimes after boiling, the fluid is saved, given to the mother to drink in tiny sips, mixed with wine, if she's lucky. You shudder at the idea, the taste, the meaning, but to them, it's less grotesque than it is necessary. Life is raw here, and healing is rarely elegant. Other times, the cooked remains are buried afterward, deep in the garden or beneath the threshold of the home. Always somewhere symbolic. You don't want animals digging it up. That's a bad omen, especially dogs. There's even a tale the women whisper when they think you're asleep about a woman who forgot to bury the afterbirth properly. Her child grew up to be cursed with wandering feet, always leaving home, never settling. A traveler's doom, they say, all because the placenta wasn't returned to the earth. It's not just superstition, not entirely. In many cultures, even beyond Europe, the placenta is sacred. Some believe it's the twin of the baby. Others see it as the vessel that must be honored for having carried the soul. In medieval Christian households, it was sometimes thought to contain the child's first breath, its shadow, in a way. So, when it's handled with rituals, with boiling or burying or burning, it's not waste management. It's spiritual housekeeping. Back near the cradle, the baby sleeps again, undisturbed by the smell. You glance down and notice a tiny red thread has been tied around his ankle. Another charm. You're losing count. You feel like you're living inside a mobile shrine. A woman hands you a small piece of beeswax molded into the shape of a bird. She tells you to hold it while you sleep. It keeps the mother's milk sweet, she says, entirely serious. You clutch it without asking more. The room shifts focus again. Now they're talking about signs, not from the baby, but from the placenta itself. Was it whole? Did it have a hole like a coin? Was the cord thick? Was there a knot? Each answer carries a weight. A knot in the cord might mean the baby will be stubborn. A hole could mean a future illness. A smooth cord, a gentle soul. The midwife confirms your baby's cord was thick and spiraled. That's good. That means strength. Or it means nothing. But they smile anyway. You hear the pot bubble louder, then go quiet. It's removed from the fire and covered with cloth. You don't ask what happens next. Not all placentas are cooked. Some are burned. In wealthier homes, it might be wrapped in linen and buried with coins or cloves. In poorer houses, it might be dried and ground into powder for future healing. Yes, future. There are recipes for powders made from dried placenta, mixed with cinnamon and myrrh, supposed to heal the womb or chase away melancholy. You're too tired to feel shocked anymore. The baby stirs again, fussing, and this time you're strong enough to sit upright. Your back aches. Your thighs feel hollow, but you reach out and someone helps you position him to nurse. The movement is clumsy, but instinct catches up. As he suckles, you glance at the hearth. The flames have died down. The pot is gone. You don't ask where it went. You don't want to know. And yet, you do know. Just not with your mind, with something deeper. Something passed down. Something that lives in the hush of these women's voices, in the rituals they perform, and the ones they whisper about when they think you're too weak to listen. This is not science. This is not logic. This is something older, something that knows birth is more than biology, something that recognizes that when a new life enters the world, another part must be left behind, and how you treat that part matters, even if no one writes it down. The morning sun bleeds gently through the cloth-covered windows, now casting soft light across the floor, where women still sleep in folds, their arms tucked under their heads, or their knees drawn to their chests. Only the midwife is awake, She moves slowly, like someone who's walked this path too many times to rush it. Her hands are stained with herbs and birth. She kneels by the hearth, muttering a brief prayer. Then she stands, turns, and begins preparing the baby's first bath. This is no bubbly rubber duck moment. You're handed a small cup of warm broth and told to sip slowly while she works. The bath is ceremonial as much as it is practical, cleansing not just the body, but the spirit. In medieval Europe, newborns were considered between worlds, alive, yes, but still too close to wherever they came from. A bath helps anchor them, root them. She begins with wine. Not to drink, though, that will come later in other rituals, but to pour. A small basin is filled with diluted red wine and herbs. Thyme sage, a pinch of salt. The scent is strong, but not unpleasant. You wrinkle your nose. Won't that sting his skin? A nearby woman chuckles. If he can survive the womb, he can survive a little wine. You watch as the midwife tests the temperature with the back of her wrist. There's no thermometer, of course. Warm enough not to chill, cool enough not to burn. She nods, satisfied, and unwraps the baby. This is the first time he's been unswaddled fully. He stretches, barely. His arms tremble. His skin wrinkled and blotchy looks older than yours. But he moves and breathes and makes a tiny huffing sound as he's lowered into the liquid. No soap, no scrubbing. She wipes him gently with a strip of linen, dipped and wrung and dipped again. The cloth is dark by the end birth residue, dried blood traces of whatever clung to him during delivery. It's all removed now, with care. She starts at the head, working downward, never turning him over. He's kept upright, his face exposed to air. You're told not to interfere. This is sacred. Some regions used milk instead of wine. Others used rainwater collected during specific moons. There are stories of noble families using rose water and saffron, while peasants made do with barley water and mint. Historians still debate whether these ingredients had medicinal value or just symbolic weight. A bit of both, probably. One practice seems almost universal. The bath is done in silence. No loud voices, no songs, just quiet breathing. The idea is to ease the baby into the world without noise, without shock. The splash of water is music enough. The baby startles one's eyes opening briefly, not fully, but enough to catch a flash of the world. A candle flickers in the corner. He blinks, then closes them again. When the midwife finishes, she lifts him from the basin and wraps him immediately in warmed wool. Not too tight this time. She places a tiny embroidered cap on his head, tying it beneath the chin. You recognize the stitch. It's one your mother taught you. You hadn't realized it would be used so soon. She brings him to you, and this time you're stronger. You hold him without shaking. His weight is slight, but real. Damp warmth soaks into your skin. One of the women leans over and whispers, Now he is truly yours. You don't ask what she means, but something inside you believes it. Later, they hang the bath cloths by the fire to dry. The water is poured carefully onto the earth, just outside the door, not into the street, not down a drain. That would be careless. It must return to nature, must be received by the ground. There is something in it that doesn't belong indoors. Some households collect the bathwater for other uses, washing your hands, sprinkling it on doorsteps, even anointing farm animals. To share the strength of new life, they say. Others pour it around the edges of the garden so the child grows like the wheat. You wonder what they'd do if you lived in a stone city with no garden. Pour it on the steps, maybe, or into the roots of a tree. It's the gesture that matters. The bath is done, but the baby won't be fully dressed yet. Not until a little later, until the priest returns, or the naming is spoken aloud, or the mother's milk flows freely for 3 days. Different houses have different customs. Some say the baby is not truly clothed until the name is sewn into the cloth. You glance at the blanket around him. No embroidery yet. Soon. A woman brings you a new gown, loose, soft, dyed with woad. She helps you change slowly, carefully. Every movement is deliberate. Your body is not yours yet. It creaks and sighs and shifts like a barn in wind. When you're finally sitting upright, clothed, the midwife smiles. Now you look like a mother. You don't feel like one. Not yet. But the baby is clean. The room is brighter. The worst seems to be behind you. And in this time, in this place, that's more than enough to count as joy. The fire has softened into a low, steady glow. The air is warm, but no longer stifling. And outside, the sun begins to slip into the arms of the afternoon. You haven't left the bed. You won't for some time. That's expected. But you've started to ask the question that lingers like smoke after the last candle goes out. What will we name him? The women have opinions, of course. They always do. One suggests a family name, your father's perhaps. Another mentions a saint whose feast day falls today. You half smile, half wince. The truth is, you've already thought of a name. You thought of it months ago during those first uncertain weeks when you weren't even sure if the quickening in your belly was a child or indigestion. But you're hesitant to speak it. Because here in medieval Europe, a name carries more than identity, it carries survival. Some babies are named the day they're born, especially if they've been baptized early. Others are left unnamed for days, even weeks, especially in poorer homes. Why name something that may not live? A name makes it real, and real things can be mourned. You glance down at your child. He's breathing. His skin is warm, but you still hesitate. The midwife notices. She always notices. There's time, she says softly. And there is, but not forever. Soon the priest will return to record the baptism officially. The church demands a name. The community expects it. And more quietly, the spirits need it too. An unnamed child is said to confuse them, makes the soul too slippery, too hard to protect. In some regions, children were given placeholder names, temporary monikers, like Benedictus, meaning blessed, or infants, literally baby. They might be renamed later once they proved themselves hardy, once they proved they belonged. Other customs are stranger still. There are stories of babies being named after the first person to enter the house after birth, or after objects in the room. One tale tells of a child called Cole, because that was the first thing the midwife saw after cutting the cord. Another was named Thursday. And of course, the saints loom large. You're encouraged to pick a saint's name not just for piety, but for protection. Every child needs a heavenly ally, a bodyguard with a halo, a backup plan for when the midwife's herbs run dry and the weather turns cruel. But saints don't always get the final word. Sometimes a name is whispered by a grandmother in a dream, or found scratched on the inside of a cradle, or comes to you while staring into the firelight. And sometimes the baby chooses it. There's a belief, quiet, not officially sanctioned, that if you speak several names aloud in a room where the baby sleeps, they'll flinch or stir when the right one is spoken. No one says this in front of the priest, of course, but it's done, often. You try it later, alone. You whisper 3 names. 2 are family. 1 is yours. The baby doesn't move. Then you whisper the name you've held in your heart. His lip twitches. It's probably nothing, but probably has no place here. The next step is preparation. The priest must record the name, and the family must announce it. That means writing, or in your case, not writing, but telling someone who will write it for you. Literacy isn't assumed, especially not for women, but memory is powerful, and so is repetition. The midwife instructs one of the younger girls to begin practicing the name aloud so no one forgets before it's recorded. 3 times at least, she says. Once for the soul, once for the body, once for the community. The girl nods solemnly, then chants the name like it's part of a nursery rhyme. Another ritual, less official but just as meaningful, is the wrapping of the name. A tiny scrap of parchment or cloth inscribed with a symbol or letter from the name is sewn into the baby's cap, hidden like a signature, like a promise. In noble houses, this scrap might be gold-threaded. In yours, it's ink and string. But the meaning is the same now. The name belongs to the child, and the child belongs to the world. You think again of those who aren't named. Stillbirths, silent births, children who pass within days. Their names are often lost or deliberately withheld. There are gravestones with no inscription, or just a symbol, a rose, a lamb, a star. It's said that in heaven, those children are given names by angels, names so lovely no human tongue could hold them. You hope that's true. You really do. But your child is here, warm, breathing, wiggling his fingers, and as the firelight dances across his tiny face, you lean close and whisper his name again, soft, so only the room hears. The room approves. One of the women nods. The midwife smiles. And just like that, he becomes someone. The baby has a name now, and that changes everything. You feel it immediately, as if the room itself exhales, less guarded, less tense. Before he was a presence. Now he's a person, a soul with a title, a future you can speak aloud without flinching. But with the name comes responsibility. The women begin to murmur among themselves. The next decision is almost as important as the naming who will be the godparents. And no, it's not just a sweet ceremonial role. In medieval Europe, becoming a godparent is as binding as kinship, sometimes more. You shift upright as the midwife leans close. Have you chosen them yet? You haven't. Not officially. But you know what she means. This isn't just about religion. It's about politics, about community, about survival. Godparents don't just stand next to your baby in church. They promise to step in if you die. They'll help raise the child, teach him prayers, bring him to confession, ensure he knows the proper saints and avoids the wrong taverns eventually. It's a role of spiritual mentorship and social leverage. Choose poorly, and you risk your child's future. Choose well, and you secure alliances that could protect your family for generations. In some towns, godparents are picked weeks in advance. In others, it's decided on the day, depending on who's available or who arrives first. There are even stories of parents choosing godparents based on a dream or a sign, or because someone brought a particularly nice loaf of bread after the birth. But there are rules, strict ones. You can't have too many godchildren. Canon law limited how many spiritual kinships one could form, more than 3 or 4. That raised eyebrows, not just from the church, but from neighbors who whispered about overreaching families trying to network their way into heaven. And some people can't be godparents at all. Anyone under excommunication, disqualified. Anyone with a reputation for sin, out. Midwives, sometimes allowed, sometimes frowned upon depending on the region and the priest's mood. You think about asking your sister. She's reliable, sharp, already whispering to the baby like they're sharing secrets. But she's unmarried, and in some places that's considered a strike. Then again, she's devout, knew the saints before she could walk. You decide to ask the priest later. But carefully. Priests have their own opinions. Across the room, one of the women tells a story, half gossip, half warning, about a child whose godmother failed to attend the baptism. The child grew sickly, cried at odd hours, wouldn't take milk from any breast. Not properly claimed, they said. Still wandering. Another story, gentler this time. A child whose godfather made a wooden toy for him each year on his name day. The boy grew up to be a carpenter, and his tools were blessed, they said, because of that love. You hope for the second story. The priest arrives by mid-morning. His robe is less clean than yesterday. You suspect he's been to several homes already, some joyful, some not. He listens carefully to the name, repeats it twice, then writes it in the parish record with slow, deliberate strokes. He asks, and the godparents, you say your sister's name, and your husband names his cousin. Steady, well-liked, devout. The priest nods, satisfied. It's official now. The name is not just yours. It's the community's, written in ink filed under heaven. After the priest leaves, your sister steps forward to kiss the baby's forehead. She doesn't say anything, but the way she looks at him says plenty. One of the older women brings a small cloth parcel, a gift from the godmother. Inside is a tiny spoon carved from bone. It's symbolic, to feed him if you cannot. In wealthier families, the gift might be silver. In yours, bone is plenty. The sentiment is richer than the material. She places it beside the cradle with care. Later, the cousin stops by. He offers no grand gesture, just a quiet touch to the child's blanket and a muttered blessing. Still, the room seems to shift again, as if it's saying yes now. He belongs to more than just you. Godparenthood is a kind of spiritual adoption, and unlike many roles in medieval life, this one doesn't end. If the child survives to adulthood, the godparents are expected to guide them into marriage, vocation, and even burial if needed. In some towns, a godfather could even speak on behalf of a godchild in court. It's not a title, it's a lifelong pact. You look at your baby again. Now a name, a soul, a godson. Someone offers bread and cheese. You eat it slowly. The food tastes stronger than yesterday, more like food, less like medicine. Maybe because the baby is stronger too. Maybe because now he's not just yours to worry over. He has a village now, and in this world, that means everything. The bells from the village church toll softly in the distance, just once, then silence. It's not a feast day, not a mass, just the timekeeper marking another ordinary afternoon in a world that now feels permanently changed. You lie in bed, cradling your baby against your chest. His warmth seeps into your skin, steady and grounding. The women move quietly around the room, tying bundles of herbs, folding linens, rearranging the space from sacred back to something closer to domestic. And then someone says it, the next step. It's almost time for churching. You freeze just slightly, not from fear, from hesitation. Because churching, the ritual of purification after childbirth, is a strange kind of threshold. It marks your return to the public world, to spiritual cleanliness, to social life. But it's also a reminder, for the past 40 days, you've been considered unclean, not just physically, spiritually. Churching is a ceremony performed by a priest, typically about 6 weeks after birth, to purify the mother before she can re-enter sacred space. You can't go to Mass. You can't touch consecrated bread. In some places, you can't even enter the church building until it's done. You remember your neighbor last year, how she stood outside the chapel, baby in arms, while the priest came out to bless her. She didn't seem ashamed, just tired. There's no rush, But the women begin to prepare you anyway, not for the ritual itself that's still days away, but for what it means. You'll need a clean gown, one says, with white trim. You'll need to fast the night before, says another. And don't forget the candle. Ah, yes, the candle. At the churching, you'll kneel near the altar with a lighted taper in hand. The priest will pray over you, sprinkle holy water, and bless your return to the community of the faithful. In some villages, they draw a small cross in chalk on your forehead. In others, they tie a ribbon around your waist. Some women view the ceremony as joyful, a kind of rebirth, a chance to thank God for surviving what so many do not. Others see it as a humiliation, a public reminder that for all your sacrifice you were considered dirty for weeks, as if bringing life into the world had stained you. Historians still debate the roots of churching, whether it evolved from Jewish purification customs or was shaped by local superstition. Probably both. What's clear is that the ritual was meant to mark a turning point from mother as vessel to mother as whole again. You sip warm cider and stare at the cradle. The baby sleeps. Again. He sleeps a lot. That's good. For now. The midwife asks if you're bleeding less. You nod. She checks the cloth beneath you anyway. Not out of mistrust. Out of experience. Hemorrhaging days after birth is one of the great fears. Sudden, silent, final. Satisfied, she sits beside you and rubs a bit of lavender oil on your wrists. For strength, she says, and perhaps also for scent. Churching has its own little customs. Some women wear their hair loose to show humility. Others braid it tight to show control. Some carry rosemary in their pockets. Others pin a bit of lace over their hearts. In noble houses, the churching is a full event. Processions, feasts, music. Sometimes the child is named again with new godparents appointed if the first ones fell ill or proved unreliable. Politics, always. For you, it'll be simpler. A candle, a prayer, a step into the chapel, maybe a hymn if the priest's in a generous mood. The women continue discussing who might go with you. Your sister, of course. Perhaps your mother, if her knees can bear the walk. They'll carry the baby in a wrap, or maybe let you hold him if your arms are strong enough. You wonder what you'll feel on that day. Pride, shame, relief. The act of being let back into the church is heavy. It's a subtle reminder that while you were creating life, you were also straddling the edge of death. That while your body gave something, it also took something. And that something needs to be reconciled. Still, you know this. You want to go. You want to stand candle in hand and feel the cool hush of the chapel wrap around you. You want to see the stained glass filter sunlight onto your feet. You want to hear the words that have been said to thousands of women before you. Blessed art thou who hast brought forth. Because in this time, in this place, survival is not assumed. It's earned, marked, named, witnessed. And when the priest places his hand upon your head and speaks the old Latin blessing and guides you back into the sacred fold, you'll not just be purified, you'll be remembered. The sun has slipped past its highest point now, and a stillness settles over the house that's different from the night before. It's not the sacred quiet of labor or the hushed reverence of first cries. It's something more ordinary, more human. The kind of hush that comes when work is done and everyone's waiting for what comes next. You're propped up on fresh linens. The baby is fed and swaddled again. The midwife finally takes a seat near the fire and closes her eyes for the first time in what might be a full day. The other women begin packing away their bundles of herbs and tightening the lids on their jars. But the birth isn't over. Not yet. Because now you start to hear the stories. Not yours, not yet. Theirs. One of the younger women, barely past 15, kneels beside you and begins folding the blood-stained cloths. She glances over, wide-eyed. "Is it always like that?" she whispers. The oldest woman in the room lets out a laugh so dry, it sounds like parchment curling in fire. "Worse," she says, "if you're lucky." And then it begins. Each woman tells her version, where, when, who helped. Some gave birth in winter, hands turning blue between contractions. Others on haystacks in fields with no roof overhead. One woman tells of delivering twins in a thunderstorm, lightning cracking every time she screamed. You listen wide-eyed, barely believing. And then someone asks softly, "But it's different for the nobles, isn't it?" Ah, there it is, the divide. Because birth, like everything else in medieval life, does not ignore class. If you're a peasant or townswoman, like you give birth in your home, surrounded by neighbors, relatives, and one midwife. If you're lucky, your bed might be straw. Your water might be fetched from the nearest well. Your comfort depends entirely on what your household can afford. But if you're noble, the experience is no less dangerous, but far more elaborate. A lady of the court, when her time nears, is confined to her chamber for a full month before the birth. Not just to rest, though, that's part of it, but to separate her from the world, from sin, from men, from disease. The windows are covered. The crucifix is blessed. Only women may enter, ladies in waiting, high-ranking midwives, noble companions. The room becomes a cocoon of prayers and privilege. And yet, nobility offers no immunity from danger. You remember the story of Queen Jane Seymour, who died 12 days after giving birth to Edward VI. Despite having the best physicians in the kingdom, the prayers of every church, and an army of servants, still she bled. Still she died. Noble women had access to comforts, feather beds, spiced wine, embroidered birthing cloths. But they were also more likely to suffer interference. Physicians, mostly male, would be called in, armed with theory's tools and very little actual help. Some prescribed mercury. Others bled the mother mid-labor to balance the humors. Midwives often resented this. Let the men play doctor once the baby is breathing, one woman mutters now, but don't let them near when the work's being done. You ask if noble babies were born healthier. The midwife snorts, they're softer. What she means is noble babies were often premature or sickly, the result of endless intermarriage, poor diets, or being kept too long indoors. They were swaddled in silks, fed with silver spoons, and died just as often. One woman tells the story of a countess who gave birth to 10 children. Only 2 survived, and she had 6 nurses, a priest on standby, and a bed made of goose feathers. You look at your own child. His blanket is coarse. His cradle is hand-carved. But he breathes. He suckles. He curls his toes when touched. Maybe soft isn't always best. Still, there's envy in the room. Not for the titles, not for the silks, but for the help. A noble woman might never lift her own baby. She has wet nurses, cradle rockers, herbalists, guards at her door. Her meals are prepared, her linens changed by handmaids. She's treated as both precious and fragile, protected, cosseted, revered. You, on the other hand, will be washing your own cloths by week's end, if your legs stop shaking by then. But there's pride, too. The oldest woman in the room, wrinkles deep as plowed furrows, leans over and says, they call them ladies. But we're the ones who bring life into this world with our own hands. It's not arrogance. It's fact. You're not carried to birth on the back of luxury. You drag yourself there, screaming, clawing, clutching saints' names and ragged cloth in the dark. And you survive. Somehow. A pause falls over the room. The women sit together in silence, now not exhausted, just quiet. A candle guttering on the sill. The baby lets out a hiccup. The woman folding the cloth speaks again, eyes on the floor. When I have mine, I hope it's here. You blink. In this small room with its stained rags, its boiling pots, its superstition and sweat. She nods. Because here, at least someone holds your hand. Someone knows your name. Someone listens. Here, birth isn't a procession. It's a passage. And when it's over, if you're lucky, you're not just alive. You're seen. The afternoon light begins to tilt toward gold, casting long shadows on the walls. The baby stirs in his sleep, fists twitching beneath the wool blanket. You watch him heartbeat, still unsure if it should slow down yet. Your body's exhausted, but your mind lingers just behind your eyes, alert and unwilling to rest. The midwife notices. Of course she does. She doesn't say anything at first, but then she walks over, kneels at your side, and presses a damp cloth against your forehead. Has the doctor been by yet? She asks casually. You almost laugh. No, of course not. You know how this works. Doctors, real doctors, men trained in universities, with Latin phrases and long coats don't usually come for births unless something's gone very wrong. Their presence means danger, not relief. And yet sometimes they appear anyway. She stands up and stretches her back. There was one last spring, she says, called for a rich merchant's wife. Brought a copper tool I've never seen before. Didn't help. She bled to death by morning. The women in the room fall silent. Everyone knows a story like that. Because in medieval Europe, medical care was deeply divided, not just between rich and poor, but between men and women, experience and theory, healing and status. Doctors were often educated in universities in Salerno, Bologna, or Paris. They read Galen Hippocrates' Avicenna. They studied the four humors, blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. They could quote ancient texts about wombs wandering like wild animals and advised using heat to drive them back into place. But they had little first-hand experience with childbirth because that was women's work. Midwives were usually barred from formal study. Their knowledge came from apprenticeship, from repetition, from watching other women suffer and live. They used their hands, their ears, their intuition. Doctors used tools. They cut. They bled. They theorized. The midwife chuckles. They come with their instruments and powdered deer horn and think they know the body better than a woman who's bled on straw 20 times. There's an edge in her voice, not bitterness, just memory. Some doctors dismissed midwives entirely, calling them ignorant, superstitious, dangerous. Others grudgingly accepted their role, but insisted on supervision. In larger cities, midwives were sometimes licensed, forced to swear oaths, avoid witchcraft, and report any abnormal births to the church. You've heard those stories too, of midwives accused of stealing pain or invoking saints without permission, or worse, using charms not found in Scripture. If a baby was stillborn or deformed, suspicion often turned first toward the woman who caught it. Midwives know too much, one woman mutters, and they don't wear robes to hide it. Sometimes a doctor is called in when labor stalls. He'll arrive late with his apprentice smelling of ink and vinegar. He may examine the mother awkwardly, roughly. He might attempt to turn the baby with a metal hook or prescribe a powder of crushed pearls and mint. If that fails, he will nod solemnly and leave the rest to the women again. Because when the screams start, when the blood pools, when the prayers tighten into fists, the doctor is not the one holding your hand. The midwife is. You ask if doctors ever help. They shrug. Sometimes. There's a tale of a surgeon who removed a baby with a blade when the mother collapsed. She died, but the child lived. They buried her with her hand still curled, as if still pushing. Another story tells of a monk physician who used honey to treat a torn perineum. The woman survived, and he was called a miracle worker. No one talks about the woman herself. You glance at your midwife. She hasn't left your side for more than a moment. She didn't bring a bag of tools or a satchel of scrolls, just a belt of herbs, a candle, her hands. And yet, your baby is here, and so are you. You ask quietly, "Do you ever get tired?" She raises an eyebrow. of birth, no, of death. The room goes still. She doesn't answer right away, just stares at the baby, his chest rising, falling like a question that has already been answered once. Then she says, I don't count how many I've helped deliver, only how many left without names. The room breathes again. That night there's no doctor, no robe, no ink, just the fire, the midwife, a baby with a name, and a mother learning to trust that maybe, just maybe, she won't need saving. It's deep evening now. The glow of the fire has dimmed to an ember-red cradle, pulsing gently in the hearth. The midwife has wrapped the baby in his third layer of wool, tight as a prayer. The women begin to settle into their quiet routines, some slipping away to their homes, others curling up near the walls to sleep one more night under your roof. You should be sleeping too, but instead you stare at the baby and try to count his breaths, just to make sure. He makes a small hiccup. You don't move. Then he squeaks again, a brief snort, then nothing. His stillness is almost theatrical, like he's pausing for effect. You nudge him with one finger. He sighs, and you sigh too. Then someone says the word you'd been hoping to avoid, twins. The room shifts. Not the air, not yet, but the temperature of the conversation. Did you feel too? One woman asks. You shake your head. You're not having twins. You're sure. You'd know, wouldn't you? But she wasn't talking about you. She was talking about them. Remember old Marta's niece? Another adds. Twins. Born under the hunter's moon. First one fine. Second one never cried. Said he was born with teeth. The room quiets again. Twins in medieval Europe are both wonder and warning. Some say they are a blessing, double joy, double favor from God. But more often, they are met with suspicion. Two babies from one womb, unnatural, dangerous, mysterious. It unsettles people who've been taught that order is sacred and birth is already precarious enough without doubling the stakes. Some believe twins are caused by two souls being sent too quickly. Others whisper that one must be a changeling left by fae or spirits to confuse the mother. And if they look different, say one, dark-haired, one light, one cries often, one silent. Well, then the stories grow darker. You've heard the tales. One is the child of her husband, the other of the devil. One born facing backward will bring famine. Twins born under a red moon must never sleep in the same cradle. If one dies, the other will follow within days. Historians still argue about whether medieval people truly feared twins, or if these stories were just cautionary tales. But fear doesn't need logic. It just needs repetition. The midwife speaks now. Her voice is firm. They're rare. And when they come, we prepare. 2 cradles, 2 baptisms, 2 candles. She pauses, but one name at a time. In some places, twins are deliberately given names that contrast hope and sorrow, light and shadow, Adam and Eve. The idea is to keep them spiritually balanced, to ensure that if one falls, the other doesn't tip with them. Some regions even separate the twins for their first week, one kept with the mother, one with the godmother, just to be safe. But the most chilling custom, if one twin dies before baptism and the other lives, some priests insist the living child's baptism must include a second name, the name of the one who passed, so that no part of the soul is lost, so that one may carry what the other could not. You look down at your single child, just one, that you know of, that you hope. The midwife seems to read your thoughts. Don't worry, she says, you had one heartbeat, one cry. He came alone, you exhale. But then, she adds, sometimes they come one at a time. You laugh, but not really. Still, the baby is here, alone, whole, breathing. You whisper his name again, just to feel it in your mouth, just to make sure it belongs. One of the women sitting cross-legged near the fire begins a story. She speaks of a village woman who bore twins under a full moon. The first was loud, hungry, restless. The second was silent, slept all night, smiled by dawn. The village said the second was not quite right. When he turned 7, he stopped talking altogether, refused bread, drew circles in ash. The mother took him to the priest. The priest called for salt and iron and prayers. But the child smiled again and walked into the woods. They never saw him after that. The mother, aged 20 years in 2, her hair went white, but she never spoke ill of him. He was born in silence, she said, and maybe silence was where he belonged. The fire cracks once sending sparks up the flue. Someone changes the subject. Good, because even when they're just stories, twins have weight. And in a world where every child feels like a fragile miracle, barely clinging to this earth, the idea of two souls tied together, sharing breath, fate, danger, is more than most hearts can hold. You pull the baby closer, press your nose to his hair. One heartbeat, one name, one candle burning. That will be enough for tonight. The candlelight dances quietly across the cradle now, and the house has grown still, the kind of stillness that only follows too many hours of movement. The baby is swaddled, his mouth, slack arms, tucked against his chest like a prayer rolled into linen. Outside, the wind has picked up. It scratches at the shutters like a visitor too shy to knock. You shift slowly, the ache in your hips deepening, the tightness in your belly still pulsing slower now, but insistent, like an echo your body hasn't quite finished listening to. The midwife checks the cloth beneath you, then gently squeezes your hand, and then, as if on cue, no one speaks. The room enters a kind of unspoken agreement. This is the time when nothing is said too loudly. This is the time when women remember. A log cracks in the fire, and one of them asks the question no one ever really wants to answer. What happens if the baby doesn't live? The air doesn't stir. Because you all know. In medieval Europe, stillbirths are heartbreakingly common. Even children who breathe nurse cry, and survive the first night can still fade by week's end. There are no incubators, no antibiotics, no second opinions. There is only watching, waiting, hoping the fever doesn't rise, or the eyes don't cloud, or the chest doesn't rattle. If a child dies before baptism, it is the mother who mourns, but quietly, carefully, because she is not only grieving a baby, she is grieving a soul left unmarked by the church. Such a child cannot be buried in consecrated ground, at least not officially. But the mothers find ways. There are stories passed from hearth to hearth of women digging small graves behind chapels under the cover of night, of midwives performing whispered baptisms over still bodies, of a priest's assistant who forgot to report a secret burial near the altar steps. Some communities even create special burial places for these unnamed ones' fields beyond the wall, hedgerows, under trees, places where the wind is gentle and the earth is soft, places no one visits, but everyone remembers. In some regions, clay figurines are buried instead of the child, not to replace the soul, but to symbolically guide it. A little doll, a carved lamb, a pebble with a mark scratched into it. Something, anything. Historians still debate whether these practices were common or rare, but they show up often enough in letters, in church records, and folklore to suggest they were real enough to matter. If the child dies after baptism, the grief changes shape, but not its weight. There will be mourning, loud or silent, depending on your station. Wealthy families might hold processions draped black over cradles, commission small paintings of the child swaddled in white, asleep in heaven. Poor families might wrap the body in the same cloth it was born in and bury it quickly before the sun rises. You've seen both. One woman, still sitting near the fire, begins to hum a lullaby that's not for sleeping, but for saying goodbye. You've heard it before, only once. Years ago, another speaks up gently. I lost one, she says. No one looks at her. No one asks for the story. But she tells it anyway. He was born early, too small, cried once like a bird. Never again. She pauses. I named him after my brother. Didn't tell anyone. A silence follows. This one is kind. Heavy, but kind. Because this is not just the story of one child. Every woman in this room has a version. A body memory. A moment where the cradle stayed empty too long. A night when the fire was too quiet. You reach for your baby's foot. Press your finger against the curve of his heel. Still warm, still here. But you feel it now, how thin the veil is between this world and whatever waits beyond it. One woman says that children who die young become stars. Another says they wait in gardens full of flowers, tended by angels with soft hands. The church has other explanations, but tonight you prefer the stars. There is one final ritual for lost children, a quiet one. Some mothers sew their name or what would have been their name into the lining of their own cloak, not for display, just so the child stays close. Others keep a single item, a cap, a shoe, a strip of linen, tucked into the corner of a drawer or folded in with the churching gown. One woman in this room wears a brooch carved from a wooden toy. Another has a birth charm tied around her wrist that she's never removed. They don't say who they belong to. They don't have to. The wind scratches the shutters again. The fire shifts. The baby breathes. And you close your eyes just for a moment, grateful for the quiet and terrified of it too. By morning, the house is still again, but in a different way. Not the reverent stillness of pain or the brittle silence of fear. This is something gentler, the kind of quiet that follows survival. The baby is tucked in his cradle. The fire has burned to ash, and you somehow are sitting up, not fully upright, not without effort, but it's something. Your bones creak, your spine protests, your stomach feels like someone replaced it with a pouch of wet sand. Still, you're up. A small cup of broth is placed in your hand. Fennel again, a trace of marrow. You sip carefully, savoring the warmth, and while you do, the conversation shifts to something more practical, more public, more long-lasting than anything else that's happened so far. Feeding, not from a bowl, from you. The midwife approaches gently, her voice lower than usual, as though this part of the ritual requires more quiet than the birth itself. Has the milk come yet? You pause. You don't know. You think so. The baby had suckled, but your body still feels foreign. The lines between sensation and exhaustion are blurred. She presses 2 fingers against your breast, firm, but not rough. Then nods. It's starting. You expected relief. Instead, a new kind of anxiety flutters awake in your gut. Because in medieval Europe, feeding your baby isn't just biology, it's a decision that will shape your standing in the community, your child's health, and your household structure for years to come. Breastfeeding is the default for most women, but not all, and not always. If you're poor or live far from any wet nurse or can't afford a replacement in the kitchen or fields, you feed your child yourself. It's not a question. It's a requirement. Your breast becomes your child's only guarantee of survival. But if you're noble or wealthy enough, you might not feed the baby at all. That's where the wet nurse comes in. Wet nurses are women hired to breastfeed children who aren't their own. They're chosen carefully, healthy, fertile, moral, at least publicly, and not too old. Their own children are often weaned early, or given away sometimes to make room for the new infant. It's a profession, but also a sacrifice. There are strict rules. A good wet nurse must avoid garlic, too pungent, no wine, no strong emotions, either rage or grief, were believed to spoil the milk, no sex, especially. That could curdle the flow, or so they said. Historians still argue about how widespread wet nursing was. In cities, it was common. In rural villages, rare, sometimes frowned upon. but everywhere it carried meaning. A child who nursed from his mother was seen as closer to her physically and spiritually. A child raised on another woman's milk was part of a larger household economy. It created new bonds, new obligations. The wet nurse became family, sort of. In some regions, wet nurses could even be held responsible for the baby's well-being. If the child grew sickly, people whispered. If the child died, some demanded repayment. You've heard stories. One wet nurse in Marseille was stoned after 2 babies she nursed died within the same year. You look at your baby now, curled like a seedling mouth, slightly open. You want to feed him. You also fear it. Because feeding is more than nourishment. It's pressure. Your supply could falter. Your milk could sour. Your body could fail him after all it's already done. The midwife hands you a piece of fennel to chew, believed to bring milk. Then she ties a red wool cord around your ankle. To keep the flow steady, she explains. You don't ask how that works. You're beyond asking. The baby fusses. You lift your gown. He latches clumsily. There's a sting, then a pull, then a warmth so primal it feels like a string between your ribs, and his jaw is being drawn tight. You close your eyes, not from pain, from awe. The room hushes again. There are other customs, too. In some towns, the baby's first feeding is marked with a prayer. In others, a spoon of honey is touched to the lips first, so sweetness enters the body before anything else. A drop of wine, a taste of cream, a blessing whispered into the ear while he drinks. Today you do none of these, just skin and breath, and your heart thudding in time with his small gulps. Later, someone offers to sit with him while you rest. You decline. Your arms are sore. Your back aches. Your legs haven't felt right in days. But this you can do. You whisper his name. He shifts, suckles, harder. And for the first time since the pain started, since the candle was lit, since the breathless silence of his first cry, you feel deep in your bones that you are not broken. You are feeding him. You are enough. The next few days pass in a haze, not of sleep exactly, but of softness. The kind where time stretches and folds like cloth still warm from the sun. You remain mostly in bed as expected. The baby is never more than an arm's reach away. And while your body aches in new quiet ways, the world around you begins to turn again. And with it comes noise. Not loud, not jarring, just the slow return of life voices outside, the clang of pots, the creak of a neighbor's door, a cough echoing down the street. You hear footsteps, greetings, the regular rhythms of a village no longer holding its breath. But inside your home, the hush remains. The women still move lightly. The fire still burns low. But now there is a new subject spoken about, gently but unmistakably present. The monastery and the baby. You blink at the mention. Because in most homes, babies stay home. They are wrapped, fed, blessed, named. They grow under their mother's eye, their father's roof, their godparents' watch. But not always. Sometimes babies appear in places they shouldn't, even in monasteries. You listen in silence as a story unfolds. 3 years ago, the midwife begins tying herbs into a linen pouch. I was called to a house near the edge of town. Noble family. Girl, barely 16. No husband. You already know the shape of the story. She gave birth quietly. No screaming, no prayers, just a cry, and then silence. The next morning, the child was gone. She places the pouch on a shelf. They said he was sent to an abbey. For safekeeping, the other women nod. Some grimace. Because while monasteries and convents are places of God, they are not immune to the complications of earthly life. And childbirth, it visits everyone, even behind stone walls. Sometimes noble families send unwanted children to be raised by monks or nuns. Sometimes it's a mercy. Other times, a secret. There are records, thin and vague, of infants appearing at monastery gates, swaddled and unnamed, with nothing but a coin or a charm pinned to their cloth. Foundlings. Some are raised. Some are placed. Some are not. You think of the stone nuns you've passed at the edge of town, their faces carved into pillars, serene, silent. But even stone holds secrets. One woman says she once knew a novice who disappeared for 6 months, came back paler, quieter, and never walked the same. They said she had a vision, the woman adds, then shrugs. But we all knew better. There are rumors, always rumors, of nuns giving birth in silence, babies smuggled away before dawn, of monks who father children, then vanish them behind rituals and silence, of convent laundresses who find blood where no one is bleeding. You don't ask if these stories are true, because you've learned in medieval Europe truth bends beneath the weight of belief, and belief is strong enough to make silence stick. But sometimes there is no scandal, no shame, just a practical choice. In large abbeys, orphaned babies are taken in, baptized, and given over to wet nurses or lay sisters. Some grow up within the walls, serving as stable boys or kitchen girls. Some are trained to read, to pray, to live within the cloister. It's not a bad life, unless you ask the mothers. Sometimes the midwife says they send the child because they think it's best, but they never stop looking. There's a pause. One woman near the fire pulls something from her pocket, a scrap of linen. You think at first it's a rag, but then you see the embroidery, a name unfinished. One corner has been carefully folded and sewn shut, as if it hides something inside. A hair, a letter. She doesn't open it, she doesn't speak. But everyone in the room turns toward her, just for a moment, and then away again. No one asks questions. The baby stirs. You pick him up, feel the weight of him settle against your chest. His warmth is real. His breath is real. His name is real. And still you wonder how many mothers held their children just like this, only to pass them through a monastery gate the next morning. In some places they leave tokens, so the child might one day be identified. a ring, a ribbon, a mark sewn into the hem of a blanket. There's even one record of a mother tearing a coin in half, keeping one piece and pinning the other to the swaddle. For later, she wrote in the margins of a prayer book. Later never came. You look down at your child and think, I will never need a coin. But you also think they probably thought the same. Outside, the bells ring once again. Inside, the cradle creaks. And the stories continue. Because silence is heavy. But it always has an echo. The next morning arrives gently. No fanfare, no bird song, just light, bleeding slowly through the linen-draped window and resting on the uneven wooden floor like a second skin. You wake with your baby curled beside you, the cradle abandoned for the warmth of your own breath. His tiny fingers are hooked into your sleeve. You haven't the heart to move them. And today, finally, someone mentions it plainly. It's time to bind the child, not in the sinister way it sounds. No chains, no ropes, just cloth, swaddling. Though it's been done since the day he was born today, it's more formal, more structured, because swaddling in medieval Europe is not a fleeting newborn ritual. It's a long-term commitment. The baby, still just days old, will now begin his daily bindings. Arms tucked straight down, legs pressed together, wrapped tightly in linen or wool, from chin to toe, until he resembles a loaf of bread more than a human child. You frown. He squirms. You hesitate. The midwife predictably notices both. This keeps him strong, she says. You want to ask how wrapping someone like a scroll leads to strength. But you stay quiet. Because this is tradition. And tradition is louder than questions. Swaddling in this time and place is almost universal. It's believed to straighten limbs, shape bones, and most importantly, keep the baby from hurting himself. A loose limb can be dangerous. Babies are fragile. They scratch. They squirm. They forget they have fingers and try to eat them. They roll at the wrong time and tumble off a pallet. Swaddling prevents all that, and some say it reminds them of the womb. The midwife brings out the binding cloths. They're long, narrow strips, some freshly washed, others already tinged from use. One has a small red stitch near the hem, the sign of a prayer spoken over it. You don't ask what kind. First, a clean shift is placed on the baby. Then, layer by layer, the bindings begin. Under his arms, across his chest, down to the knees. A gentle twist here, a firm tuck there. The baby grunts once, then stills. He looks contained, like a blessing folded in cloth, one of the women says with a smile. You try to smile back. It doesn't reach your eyes, because part of you wonders if he's comfortable, if he's frightened, if he wishes to stretch and can't remember how. But these are the things you do to keep him safe. The bindings are not just physical. They are symbolic. An unruly child. Blame a mother who failed to bind properly. A crooked leg. Clearly the swaddling was done too loosely. a nervous temperament. Perhaps he was left unwrapped for too many hours. Historians today debate the long-term effects. Some suggest that prolonged swaddling led to joint issues. Others argue it helped prevent deadly infections by limiting exposure. Most agree it was done out of fear of injury, fear of death, fear of what might happen if the baby were free. And it doesn't end after a few days. Some children remain swaddled for weeks, others for months. Some only have their bindings removed to change linen or for brief periods of airing out by the fire. A rare few are given a few hours of freedom to kick and stretch, but only if the weather is warm and the room is quiet. You glance at the bundle in your arms. He looks peaceful enough, but so does a log. The women watch you. They expect approval, pride. So you nod. But then one of the older women leans in and speaks quietly. My second hated it, screamed like he was drowning. So I let him loose for an hour every day. Just me and him. You blink, and he's alive, strong, never broke a bone in his life, climbed a roof at 8. The other women chuckle, but there's no scolding, because even in a world of rules, there are moments of softness, of personal rebellion, of quiet exceptions passed between mothers like secrets. They finish the binding and place the baby back in the cradle. He shifts, once lets out a breath, and then stills. You kneel beside him and whisper something only he hears. Later that evening, they will hang the swaddling cloths near the fire to dry. They'll sprinkle them with ash to ward off insects. They'll add rosemary and thyme to keep the spirits gentle. And every morning from now on, you'll do this again. Bind, tuck, bless. Because in this fragile, flickering world, a wrapped child is a safe child, a straight child, a blessed child. At least, that's the hope. And sometimes hope is the only thing we know how to wrap. The house is quiet again, but it's a different kind of quiet than the hush that followed the birth. This silence doesn't feel like something holding its breath. It feels like something exhaling, slowly, deeply. You're standing now, not for long and not without help, but enough to take 2 steps toward the cradle, enough to see the morning light catch on the curve of your child's cheek. He's asleep again, of course. He sleeps more than he cries. For now, your feet ache, your back aches, but you're not in pain exactly, not anymore, just changed. Everything is still familiar, the walls, the floor, the smell of herbs, but none of it feels quite the same. Because you are not the same. There's a line drawn across your life now, before and after. The women begin packing their bundles. The midwife folds her apron carefully, tucking in the pouches of herbs, the cloths, the tools. She doesn't ask for thanks. She doesn't need it. She has done what she came to do, and in a few days, she will do it again in another house for another woman whose world is about to split open. Your sister lingers. She wipes down the table, then brushes a strand of hair behind your ear, the way she used to when you were both much younger. You nod at her. It's the closest either of you will get to saying, "I couldn't have done this alone." The cradle creaks softly as the baby stretches one arm, just for a moment, before settling again. You think of everything that's happened: the locked room, the chair, the chance, the blood, the bath, the silence. And somehow you made it. The baby breathes. You breathe. And though there is no fanfare, no choir, no golden light falling through stained glass, you understand now why they called this whole process a miracle. Because it is. Not the easy kind, not the clean kind, but the kind that leaves you trembling and raw and absolutely certain that the world has cracked open and reformed around you. The women leave one by one. Each presses a kiss to your cheek. Each blesses the child under her breath. Each carries with her a story she will someday tell in another house to another girl clutching her belly and wondering what's to come. The midwife is last to go. She stops in the doorway, then turns back and hands you a candle stub. For next time, she says, and then she's gone. You sit beside the cradle. You place one hand on the baby's chest, just to feel it rise and fall. You realize now why they sing lullabies to children more than prayers. Not because lullabies are softer, but because they make the world seem kinder. And the world will not always be kind, but tonight it is. Tonight you are whole. The room is warm. The cloth is dry. The name has been spoken, and the candle, though burned low, is still burning. So now you lie back. Let your body melt into the bed. Let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of the child beside you. Let the fire dim into a gentle orange blur at the edge of your vision. Outside, the wind may still tug at the shutters. A dog may bark. A voice may call in the distance. But here in this small and sacred space, none of it matters. What matters is that you endured. You crossed the threshold that so many women have crossed before you, quietly, without fanfare, without applause, just strength and pain and breath and love. Your body will heal slowly. The bruises will fade. The blood will stop. The trembling will ease. And in time your arms will grow strong again, not from lifting burdens, but from holding this new life that now belongs to you. Maybe you will tell your story one day. Maybe you'll keep it to yourself. But the story lives in you now. It breathes beside you, wrapped in linen, named Blessed. So now, close your eyes. Let the weight of the candlelight and quiet settle over you. Let the pain drift to the corners of your memory. Let yourself sleep. You have done enough. You are enough. And the world for once is still.